I think what's happening in Ukraine is terrible. And for people in Taiwan, it's natural and understandable to draw parallels between Ukraine and Taiwan. Both are countries that are not part of security collectives. They face existential threats posed by much larger and hostile and irredentist neighbors. But it's important to keep in mind that these are fundamentally different situations. So that's the first thing to keep in mind. That said, what Taiwan should be looking at, and also China, are two main things: what the US is reacting to, how it reacts, as well as how the fight plays out. And a big thing to keep in mind is that with Russia, they are using a similar playbook that China could use if it decides to attack Taiwan. Not just invasion, but all on the spectrum of coercion. And this includes political warfare campaigns, cyber attacks, and missile strikes that may come before an amphibious invasion in Taiwan's situation.
What changes might Ukraine bring to the US-Taiwan relationship?
The situation in Ukraine should be a wake-up call for the US and Taiwan, because unlike Ukraine, Taiwan's relationship with great powers, they're all unofficial, and not a single country has a formal defense commitment to Taiwan. And a lot of these efforts, if there were to be a Taiwan contingency, would be US-led. Therefore, there must be a strengthening of defense relations between the US and Taiwan, and that begins with having a common language. Since the overall defense concept was put to the side, no one knows what Taiwan's defense strategy is anymore, including procurement priorities and reserve reform. It would be in the interests of both sides, the United States and Taiwan, to have some semblance of strategic clarity, whether publicly or privately, so that roles and responsibilities can begin to be established. And that includes for the invasion scenario and all of the spectrum of coercion.
In terms of priorities for Taiwan's defense, what would you place at the top?
I think the most important thing for Taiwan at this point is not any specific weapon system, but to have a clearly defined defense strategy, or at least concept, to describe the force buildup, its priorities, and reserve reform. I believe these are things that the US is looking at, and not just for US interests, but also how Taiwan would effectively build up an asymmetric force against China. Because the PLA has a growing qualitative and quantitative advantage, Taiwan must focus on certain areas. However, the US has been ambiguous with its support for Taiwan in the defense side. So Taiwan must be prepared for all scenarios.